The only way we have ever extended health span and longevity in every model organism tested is with dietary restriction without malnutrition, namely essential amino acid restriction. So that means from yeasts and flies and worms all the way to our primate cousins, the rhesus macaques. That was like, there's 2 really good studies going on with those. The only way they've ever improved health span and longevity is by restricting calories, restricting essential amino acids. Essential amino acids, the ones that we need from our diet. There's only 9. We get them everywhere. But restriction of them, where they're really high in animal products. So a plant-based diet naturally restricts essential amino acids. A plant-based diet naturally restricts calorie because you eat more, right, and for fewer calories. And so it's like a win-win kind of a way to get that natural dietary restriction without hunger and misery and deprivation. And it's basically a natural way and an easy way, a fiber-rich way and a healthy way to get what we've seen as the only way to extend health span and longevity.
Welcome back to the Yogi Triathlete Podcast. I'm Jess. I'm your host, and this is the place where we share stories of people looking, finding, and living their purpose. From the first moment we heard Julieanna Hever on the Rich Roll podcast back in 2013, we could feel the passion that fueled her purpose. It was contagious, and we wanted more. When we started the YTP in 2016, she went on the list, and today this all comes to fruition. Julieanna is the plant-based dietitian. She is the author of 4 books. Is it 4 books?
Yes, the 5th one is coming.
Okay, 5th one is coming, including The Idiot's Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition, the 1st edition, and then the 2nd edition, which she co-authored with Ray Cronise 10 years after the publishing of her first one. Julieanna, we are so grateful that timing has aligned, and I'm honored to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much, both of you. I'm honored to be here. I really am.
I'd love for you to open up our conversation with telling us a little bit about your plant-based story. When was your switch, and when did it become your life and what you do in writing books and having so much passion for plants?
It's been a long journey because I tried pretty much my whole life. I remember when I was about 13, 14, which my daughter's turning 14 tomorrow. I can't believe it. My baby. So when I was her age, I started reading, my first book was John Robbins' Diet for a New America, and he just shocked me and moved me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to participate in what's happening. For me, it was the animals. Like, I was very interested in diet and nutrition too, because I was a dancer and an actress in Los Angeles, which is a lot of pressure on what you look like and your size, and it was always an issue growing up here. And so I was always reading about that. But when I heard about the animal part from John Robbins, that to me trumped everything, and that was it. I was done. And so what does that mean? In many, many years ago, I won't date myself exactly, but I was, there was no internet. I didn't know how to look it up. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to cut out animal products. And my parents were like, a veg a what? They were just like, what are you talking about? And my mom struggled with, we always joke about this now because she never taught me how to cook. If she was going to make a recipe, it was all day making a recipe. So a veg a what was like put on the sidelines, and I was eating, side dishes and fruit roll-ups and rice cakes and Diet Cokes. And I was just trying to omit animal products. So that was my start.
And just pumping take out the animals and pump in the chemicals.
Right.
Right. It's like, cut out the middleman. I'm just going to pump the chemicals that they pump into the animals.
Fruit roll-ups in so long. Those things are really good.
I know. How old am I?
Actually, that's the second time I've heard fruit roll-ups in like 3 days. So I don't know.
Are they still around? I don't know. But
it was a recent conversation,
really?
so I think they are.
There are different derivations, I think, that I'm trying to avoid. But yeah, you're right. Pumping the chemicals. That's pretty much what happened. And, that was like, the 80s, 90s back then. That's what we were eating. Like, it was
totally.
Like normal.
Tab, Diet Coke.
Yeah.
For
okay,
sure.
I'm a little post-tab.
All right, I was tab.
Let's not get crazy. Oh, okay.
You're younger than me.
Okay, we're close, but probably, but I don't even know. Anyway, my parents got worried, of course, needless to say. And so I always talk about this story. I've published it now. And it's kind of funny because we had their friend, a nurse, take me out to dinner and tell me how I'm going to be protein deficient and iron deficient, and I have to eat animals and I can't do what I wanted to do. And she scared me, of course, being young and, impressionable. So I sat there with the steak that we ordered. It was a teriyaki steak with a pineapple ring on top that I remember, like, it was like, and I always say, once you know, you can't unknow what that steak was. And so I'll never forget that bite, but I was so scared, and I remember chewing and it would never go down, one of those chewy bites. But I eventually got back into it, and I was like, okay, this is what I have to do. And so, but I didn't give up on the message. Like, I knew it still bothered me. So I kept reading and reading and reading and reading. And again, no internet that I was aware of at the time. So it was a long journey. It was a long, long journey. And fast forward to, I was always fascinated by nutrition, like I said, because of that whole thing with the acting. And then I became a personal trainer when I was in graduate school. No, undergrad. Okay, no. I was finishing UCLA, and my undergrad degree ended up being, it was pre-med, but it ended up being theater. So I got my degree in theater, and I started personal training with this woman because I was trying to lose weight for my managers and agents, so I could look okay on film. And then I was working with this trainer, and then I started personal training. And I was like, I loved it. Because I also used to, like, I have cassette tapes of me training my sister and friends, like exercise, like doing aerobics classes. Like,
The real question is, do you have a device to play those cassette tapes on? No,
okay. I don't even have the cassette tapes anymore. they're lost somewhere. I don't know. I know.
I just had this visual of you with like big headphones on, your cassette tapes.
My Walkman, my Sony Walkman.
Yeah, your Walkman.
That was like, 20 pounds.
Oh my God, yeah. But wasn't it waterproof, like the big yellow one?
Yeah. Yes, I finally got the big yellow one for when I was exercising. But yeah, so I loved fitness and all that. So I was doing that, and it all, and then I became a trainer. So I remember studying for my ACE certification. Gosh, I don't remember what year it was. And I graduated college. My parents took me and my sister to Italy for our graduation. We both graduated at the same time and had this amazing trip. And I came home and I found out I passed my ACE certification. So I was officially a personal trainer. I was officially graduated from college. And then, like, my one client that I'd already had thrown out her back while I was gone in Italy. So my sister's like, you don't have a business. So I was like, shoot, what am I going to do? So I was knocking on people's doors, making flyers, and I started a personal training business, and I built it up. And people kept asking me about nutrition. So I was like, well, I'd been studying it my whole life, but it was really like a chapter in my personal training book that qualified me. And I was like, no, I'm not going to just say whatever comes to mind. I want to know what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. So right away, I signed up. Like, I thought I was done with school forever. I applied to grad school right away, got in right away. So I think I had one semester off. Like, I went right into it. And oh my gosh, I found my passion. Like, I've never thought how, I knew I loved nutrition, but oh my gosh, like, it was the first time in my life I was getting straight A's. I was like consuming this stuff. I couldn't get enough of this nutrition stuff. And then, it was like OChem and biochem and micro and all this like crazy stuff that I never thought I could ever face as like a more theater, artistic type of person. I loved it. So I loved grad school. I was personal training. I built up my practice. And it was like a few years in, I'm like still exploring the whole plant-based thing. Well, there was no one said plant-based back then. It was vegetarian kind of a thing. And then at the end, when I really started reading and I really started being able to have that ability, I felt confident about diving into the research, and I realized, yes, you can get all of those nutrients and actually better from plants. So it took me a long time. This was many, many years later. And then,
but in school, are you getting more traditional, like the
science and
no, there was no plant-based vegetarian. Now I want to say vegetarian. I've got myself trained.
Vegetarian. Now that I can say it, I'm going to say it again. Vegetarian.
Yeah, it's funny. But no, I got the traditional everything, but I was able to look at the science objectively for the first time and know that stuff was true. And so after that, that's when I was reading the China study. That's when the China study came out, and that's when, what else was happening at the time? I don't know. It was like, it was a no-brainer for me. I'm like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going for it. I'm diving right in. I just had my children. Great time to, sit around and do nothing. No, I'm just kidding. So I did, and it transformed my own health, completely transformed my own health. Like, my skin finally was like, I had acne my whole life, finally gone. My GI problems I had my whole life finally ameliorated. My everything was better. So I was like, I'm going to try this with my clients. Tried it with my clients. Amazing. Like, instead of like not having to, not go up in medication as the goal, or not progress in your disease state. People were getting off medications. People were recovering from illness. People were losing weight easily. It was almost like, it sounds so like impossible or cliche at the same time, where it's like, oh, like the fountain of youth, the magic. But it really was. I was seeing things that I've never seen in my life.
But you were pursuing what you love. So it was natural. It was a natural transgression. Like, you can look at it as like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened, but of course it happened. Like, you just dove in. So I think we skipped over too. You were pre-med and then you went to theater. Mm-hmm. So what shift was going? So it seems like you were always on that path, right? You were pre-med. You were curious about nutrition, obviously in the body, yes. And then you shifted to theater, and now you're back to.
Well, it was like all at once. It was like both at the same time, because I wanted to be an actress and a dancer. My mom always says, you danced before you walked. You were always on performing, and I was, but I hated that industry so much. Like, I hated it. But there was a lot of personal stuff that gets in between that. But then I realized I went to a performing arts high school. So I was doing all that. I really loved theater. I did a lot of Shakespeare. I played Juliet, which was like, my fantasy role, because I loved Romeo and Juliet. And there was a lot of that going on simultaneously. I still love that stuff, but I wouldn't want to do it anymore. But it's interestingly, now I ended up having a TV show, and I ended up having, because at first I was like, what a waste of a degree, like my undergrad degree, like what a waste to be theater. No, it totally came in handy. Like, I was able to do Dr. Oz and have my own TV show and all those things and get on stage in front of 1,000 people because of that training. I think it made it a lot easier to use those skills to deliver my message. But it's all this interwoven stuff. I don't know. But I don't think it was just that I was doing my passion. I think it was the plant-based diet, because I was teaching nutrition and fitness, and I was doing great. Like, I had clients. I had a waiting list. After knocking on people's door, I had a waiting list of clients that wanted to work with me. But I wasn't having the same success as I did when I switched to plant-based. But that said, there's all these personal things. I went into labor on an exercise ball at my client's house at 7 a.m. I've been training her for 10 years, and I was like 9 months pregnant. I was like, when is this baby gonna get here? And it was 10 days early. And this is literally now almost exactly to the day 14 years ago. It's gonna make me all emotional. And I love personal training. I loved my clients so much. Like, they were at my wedding, and they were like, we were so close. And then I was sitting there, like, I was like so tired at the time. I was doing lateral raises on the ball with my client, and I was like, ooh, I think my water just broke. And I went to the bathroom, and she drove me to the hospital, and I stopped personal training right then. Like, I gave up my whole business, which is a really awful personal story. But that, and then that's when it just like, it all happened in a weird way. So I don't know, but everything changed when I started teaching plant-based nutrition in terms of what was happening with my clients. And that's what was exciting. And
all your clients were receptive? They, no hesitation, or was it your delivery of introducing plant-based nutrition to them? Because usually you get that resistance.
Well, I wonder too, what I'm thinking is like, was it less confusing back then? Like, right now there's such a fight for this is the way to eat. You got to go keto. You got to go, well, now there's the carnivore movement. Rolling of the eyes. We maybe can talk about that. There's such a fight now that, and you know that, you can pretty much, we could pull up a research report, and we could give evidence to support really any way of eating, because of the way that these research projects and studies are funded and perhaps skewed. I don't know if that's the correct word. What's the correct word?
No, I would say, I would actually disagree. I would think that it does look like that on the surface.
But you know, so tell
was
us.
Like that back then. It's always been like this. I don't think that part's changed. And I don't think, and I came to a place, it took me years, but I came to a place where I stopped trying to convince anyone. Like right now, I don't want to convince anyone. I will help you. I will show you what I know, but I will never try to convince anyone anymore. I'm done. Like, I'm not going to argue. Like, now I work with Ray, and Ray loves these debates because he's so persuasive and he's so absolutely brilliant that he can go that way. I'm not interested in that. If you want me to help you, I will help you. But I try to wean away. Like, I try to turn down people every day I turn down people that I won't work with you. I won't work with you unless you really want this. If you want this, I will show you and I will help you and I will love you throughout the whole process, but I'm not going to try to convince anyone. And what I've learned from Ray also, because now we have a library with books from the beginning, every book written on metabolism, nutrition, diet from 19th century. He has everything. He's documented it. It's going to come out in the next book, his book. And then our book is a summary plus all the recipes. Nothing has changed. The Harris-Benedict equation is the same from 100, 150 years ago. He could give you the exact dates. Everything is the same. Nothing
What
has
is that
changed.
equation? What is that?
That's like how to measure your metabolism,
Okay.
like a predict your metabolism. He's actually measured hundreds of metabolisms in a calorimeter he has in his, he calls it his midlife crisis calorimeter that he bought instead of a
It's
sports
not
car.
inexpensive, I think, from what I remember him
They're
talking
expensive.
about.
Yeah. But so it's all of it. Nothing has changed, and all of these research studies that we see right now, it's all like manipulation of data.
Yeah.
If it sways, but all the information's the same.
All the information's the same, and you can basically make an argument for like the whole, gosh, maybe it's about 5 years ago or so, maybe even longer, like the whole butter is back. Like people can kind of
That was a manipulative study.
Yeah.
That was a meta-analysis that was totally manipulated. The data was manipulated.
Oh, you know what? I like this. Let's dive into that. How do you feel like that was misrepresented or manipulated? Because we do have people that listen to this. They're still doing the bulletproof coffee and things like that.
That was made up. The bulletproof coffee. Okay, that study, there's 2 meta-analyses that came out around the same time, and they took studies, and like one of them, they basically took out a variable to make it look like it didn't matter, but it's like the most important factor. I mean, there's 150 solid years of research connecting saturated fat to cardiovascular disease. You can't unseat that with one meta-analysis where they took a few studies and manipulated the variables and come up with some conclusion.
And then pop it on the cover of Time magazine.
Well, that was serendipitous, right? Because
Right.
like it's ridiculous. No, butter's not back.
Yeah,
And I mean,
that's going to sell magazines though, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
because people want to hear what they want to hear. And if that supports their viewpoint or it's like a blessing to go eat their bacon and eggs because they like it, they're going to take it. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen people, it's always the same. Like if you eat more of that stuff, you will have high cholesterol. If you have high cholesterol, you're more at risk of having a heart attack or a stroke or diabetes. I mean, it's like across the board. There's 150 years of all the data. There's the epidemiological data. There's the randomized controlled trials. There's the animal data. There's everything. It's all the same.
And it all points to the fact that eating a whole foods plant-based diet is a healthy way to go.
It's the healthiest way we've seen. We've never seen another diet reverse cardiovascular disease, advanced stage cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes. It's the only diet that's ever done that.
And it's my understanding that the body makes cholesterol. So if
Yep.
the body makes cholesterol and it makes all the cholesterol it needs, then it could be argued that we never really need to ingest cholesterol. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
it looks that way.
Yeah.
We definitely produce cholesterol.
So where do you stand on, we're just going to start firing through some topics here. Let's do it. Where do you stand on like oils? I use coconut oil on my skin.
Yeah, and my hair.
I use it in my hair.
Yeah, me too.
And we do use a little bit of oil, but I would
Not a
say
lot.
it's pretty.
Mainly goes on our bodies.
We've been doing a lot of just steaming of our vegetables now, as opposed to sautéing them in oil, which gives them just like it brightens them up. It gives them this
The oil?
No, the water.
Oh.
Just steaming it gives them this amazing crunch and beautiful color. So yeah, where do you stand on this whole thing? Because it can be really confusing, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here is kind of clean up this confusion.
So it's interesting because I've been advocating for oil-free for many years. And I teach people how to cook without oil and how to bake without oil and how to make dressings without oil. It's not necessary. It's definitely not necessary. I talk about that in Vegetarian Diet because it was necessary because it's times of scarcity and they were using oil to survive, basically olive oil. But now that I'm working with Ray and in our new cookbook with 100 recipes, it was like we've had this whole discussion many, many times. We use oil now as a flavoring, not as an ingredient. So something like sesame oil, which has you can't replicate that with sesame seeds. or a robust olive oil or a chili oil, which is real spicy. You can use it as a flavoring. So he has this really cool way of doing it where like, you know, you water saute or we do also dry saute, all that. But then at the very end, and only like probably half a dozen recipes out of 100 has a little bit of oil. And it's like a teaspoon for 4 servings.
So as opposed
for the whole thing. Yeah.
So as opposed to throwing the saute pan on, doing the glug 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 of the oil, throwing the vegetables in sauteing, it's like you can dry saute them. You can put a little bit of water in there, and then at the end use a little bit of oil for some flavoring. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because that's not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
But it's on the other side of that. People have it like, oh, coconut oil is the magic oil, and it's not. I mean, first of all, we don't use coconut oil at all, except for like what you said. I use it for my skin, but it's really high in saturated fat. Now, it's a different kind of saturated fat, and that's what everyone talks about. It's got the more medium chain triglycerides, shorter fatty acids. So is that better? I don't know. There was a recent meta-analysis, I think 2016, that came out. It's not much better than butter. So we don't really know. I definitely think it's not a miraculous anything. It could be better than maybe the meat-based saturated fats, the animal-based.
Now, do you feel like there's a difference in like, so we have a lot of people who listen to this podcast that are training for Ironman, training for ultra marathons, Ultraman, like multi-day triathlons and things like that, where activity levels are upwards of, you know, anywhere, I would say a big range between 15, 30 hours a week of training, that we need more of this. We need more fat.
Well, also the intensity of a lot of these races is lower. So obviously the sprints, you know, like sprinting in the pool for 100 meters, you need to use up energy pretty quick. So the thought process is with these long distance endurance races, so 30 hours, your body can actually process like real food because you're not taxing it as much. So would an oil like that, saturated coconut oil or something, some sort of fuel, help them be best for them along an endurance race like that? Or
I mean, the easiest source of fuel is going to be something that's carbohydrate based, but we don't like to even use carbohydrate, fat, and protein. Like we don't even talk about it really. I would never say that you should have oil while you're in the middle of a race. I would rather you be eating dates or something that's more a smoothie, whatever, something that's going to give you more immediate, easy to digest energy. So, but the question of do these long distance or endurance athletes or any kind of like intensive training athletes require more energy? Yes, of course they do. Of course you need enough to fuel and to recover for sure. Do you need more fat? I don't think so. No.
Yeah, that's what we found actually. With our athletes, we work with them in nutrition, and we can't get enough calories like into them to fuel them. They back off because they don't want to maybe have upset stomach, or maybe they're watching their weight. Like there's that mindset, whereas you need to fuel yourself. I mean, you're exercising.
Yeah, you need more. You definitely need more calorie. You need more of all the calories, but you want to eat more of the whole foods. If you're increasing your calories, which you should be to fuel and to recover, eat overall more calories. Eat your whole diet, just more of. I don't think you need to go to concentrated oils or concentrated sugars or anything to get that.
Right. Like eat the symphony, like the symphony of foods.
Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. That's what we like to say. Just like
Boom.
That's what we want you to eat. Yeah.
There you go.
That's it.
I was just thinking, I was at a 100-mile race this past weekend up in Tahoe. I didn't do it. I was pacing. And coming through the aid station, oh man, like you were saying, BJ, like because you're not moving at such a fast pace, like there's just you can take in more.
Right?
Oh, it was an unbelievable rice balls with green onion, and like you would dip it in soy sauce. They had avocado. They had all kinds of potatoes, sweet potatoes, red bliss potatoes, and it was just like it was all such yummy food that you could eat and not have to take in like the sports nutrition, like the easy.
That's what a concept. I love that.
Oh yeah, it was great. Oh my God, the rice balls. I'm still dreaming about them. I'll have to make them. They were so good. And then there was one that was such a sweet treat. It was dates, and they had medjool dates And then those, I hadn't seen these in a long time, but the maple, the little maple like candies.
Yeah.
And they had the maple candy right in the middle of the date. Like, what a sugar blast that thing was. I took that around 3:00 in the morning. I was like, that's just like energy. It was amazing with a little bit of coffee. So anyway, it's really cool when you start to get into these longer distances that you're not moving as fast, especially through the night, that you can take in these whole foods and allow your body to absorb food from these whole food, plant-based sources. And just for the record, they had vegan options at, throughout all the aid stations, and they had it on the website. Like, there'll be vegan options.
That's
and
awesome.
I know. It's
the
like
vegetable
so amazing.
broth is such a simple thing.
Oh yeah,
like,
they have vegetable broth
It's usually
now.
chicken broth. Like, they have chicken broth, and I can never do that in races. But this is the first time we've actually seen. It's a simple switch, right? Vegetable broth.
I didn't even know they give broth out. That's cool.
Yeah, it helps. Well, you
helps.
get the sodium, right? And then it will help to settle your stomach
and
a little bit.
it's warmer, so as the day progresses, it's getting cooler, and so at night you want something warm.
Yeah, it's
That's interesting.
yeah, to stay warm, because you got the engine burning all day, but then as the coolness comes in, then you can start to get like a chill. So, all right, so from the oils and kind of that confusion, let's move into the protein piece of it. And I'm still hearing people saying, I heard it this weekend, like, I need to get my protein. Oh, I ate enough protein today, so I'll be okay to pace this runner tonight. So this almost like like addiction to protein. What do we actually need for protein?
We don't even need to think about it. We're pursuing protein like it's this special magical nutrient that's not available and that's like gonna make us fitter and stronger and bigger and better and smarter. And it's crazy, this obsession with protein. It's wrong. Basically every plant has protein, has every amino acid. First of all, that's like something that's like, what? Like, you can get protein everywhere. The other thing is everyone's getting too much protein, and too much of something is not a good thing necessarily, I've yet to see a protein deficiency in anyone that doesn't have, any kind of like starvation going on. It is a starvation. And unless you're eating, I guess if you really wanted to get a protein deficiency, you would be eating white sugar, not even white flour, just white sugar and oil every day. And
it would take effort, is what you're saying.
I haven't seen it done. If you're getting enough calorie, you're not going to get protein deficient.
So let's talk about what happens when you're taking in too much protein.
Well, let me just say this. The only way we have ever extended health span and longevity in every model organism tested is with dietary restriction without malnutrition, namely essential amino acid restriction. So that means from yeasts and flies and worms all the way to our primate cousins, the rhesus macaques. That was there's 2 really good studies going on with those. The only way they've ever improved health span and longevity is by restricting calories, restricting essential amino acids. Essential amino acids, the ones that we need from our diet. There's only 9. We get them everywhere. But restriction of them, where they're really high in animal products. So a plant-based diet naturally restricts essential amino acids. A plant-based diet naturally restricts calorie because you eat more, right, and for fewer calories. And so it's like a win-win kind of a way to get that natural dietary restriction without hunger and misery and deprivation. And it's basically a natural way and an easy way, a fiber-rich way and a healthy way to get what we've seen as the only way to extend health span and longevity.
And I've heard that the too much protein actually in the end can lead to obesity and being overweight. Is that correct?
Well, people are eating so much protein because they're worried about it that they're eating. What are they eating? Well, there's a lot of problems here. Okay, this is why we call this macro confusion, and we hate talking about protein, carbs, and fat because it only causes confusion. And we believe that's one of the main reasons people are so confused about nutrition and why people are making so many mistakes.
And they can't, it's so true. And I guess we're perpetuating that right now by asking you these questions. But really what we need to ask people to do is detach from this way of thinking.
Exactly. We say, forget it. Don't talk about protein, carbs, and fat. Talk about vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. You just need to worry about eating whole foods. Because what people do is they equate protein with meat, and then eating meat, especially large amounts of it, or whey protein or all of that, you are getting other stuff. It doesn't come packaged, it's like just protein. It's got saturated fat, it's got heme iron, it's got TMAO, it's got, or L-carnitine. It has these things that promote disease. We know that, or the other side of that, you're omitting the plant foods that have lots of fiber, lots of phytonutrients. You get none of that in animal products. So it's, what are you displacing it for? What are you eating in addition to? Like, the food comes in a package, And that said, I don't want people eating protein powder or even a plant protein powder, because again, it's a concentrated source of protein. We don't need that. Why do we think that all of a sudden we need to micromanage our macronutrient intake? Since when did our body become that, predicated on our intelligence in order to precisely... We didn't even know what this stuff was 150 years ago, and we survived just fine. In fact, we were healthier. I mean, of course, there was antibiotics and stuff like that that's happened in the last century that we need, and all these medications that are keeping us alive, but we didn't have obesity like this ever. In 2011 was the first time ever in history that overnutrition surpassed undernutrition in the world. We have more people overnourished now than undernourished in the world.
Wow.
First time in history. So all of a sudden we need to micromanage our protein intake? No, we don't. We're eating too much. That's the problem. Chronic overnutrition is the problem.
That's I just need to absorb that for a second.
I'm thinking about the extremes. Like, we have these big pockets of starvation, like people starving. And then we have this big, the US, of like obesity.
We also have for the first time ever, a lot of obesity in the impoverished areas. Why? In these food deserts, fast food, it's cheap. $1, you can get a meal for your family. So it's a problem.
We actually have the solution for ceasing world hunger, because we're feeding so much of our grains to animals that are being raised to be killed. And like we just cut out that middleman and just eat the food from Mother Nature. And then there would be plenty to go around, because there is no lack on this earth. I mean, look at the leaves on that tree outside your window. There's only abundance that comes with Mother Nature, only abundance. And, I was thinking when you were describing that about how we just need to really detach from this obsession of separating out this perfect symphony of food and breaking down all this nutrition. I was teaching a yoga class last night, and like how I kept teaching that class was I would put them in the pose, and then I would just say, get out of the way. Like, get out of the way. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to breathe. And as you breathe, just allow your body to move. Stop trying to break down the pose. Stop trying to
That's exactly
right?
it.
Is this kind of exactly what you're saying? Like, get out of the way. And we're our own roadblock to our success, to our happiness, to our health in so many ways. We are our own roadblock because we're trying to intellectualize everything. And we're trying to do it right because we have this ingrained fear that we're going to do it wrong, that we're going to, that it really, I mean, if I'm going to take it way down of what I've seen in the human condition, it's this fear of not being enough, this fear of not doing it right, this unworthiness, right? So it stacks up and stacks up and stacks up in all these different departments in our life. And food is a big area where we see a lot of issues with control, right? We see it with eating disorders. I've definitely been through the gamut with that as a younger woman and girl, and binge eating and seeking food as an emotional outlet. And the way I try and see food, or try and teach, the way I see food, but the way I try and teach others to see food is that to hold it in reverence, right? Like with reverence, but that it's just fuel. It's fuel for this body to do what it needs to do in this world.
I think you're right. I think you're right. But I would add to that it is not just fuel. It is most importantly fuel. I would say it is so deeply intertwined with love and family and celebration and socializing and religion and everything. It is so intertwined and is so deep in us, like tradition and how you were raised and what your grandma made you and what you do every year at the holidays, or it's so definitive for us and it's so deep. Like it's from day, we have to eat from the second we're born, like we're eating, and you can't detach from eating. So yes, it's fuel first because, you want to fuel properly and you want to feel good and do well and live long and healthy. Mm-hmm. But because of all of that other stuff, you can't take, detach it. It is part of it is interwoven into our everyday life. And we work with clients, and it's very deeply personal to talk about food. And that's why I stopped trying to convince anyone, because I'm not going to take away your fruit roll-ups or whatever that you feel, close to. I'm not going to say, no, you can't have that because it's bad, because it's everything about food is social and deep.
I think it can help us, but it can also be to the detriment of our health, right? So we see this sometimes, like, I don't know, let's just say around the holidays, like, oh my God, I'm so stuffed, but I have to eat this pie because my mother spent so much time eating it.
Oh yeah.
So that would be something
obligation,
where,
yeah,
the obligation. But then also, like, when I go home and see my family, like I'll be going back to the Cape next week. And when I go home and see, I station myself in the kitchen and I cook for them. And that was never a dynamic that we had growing up. Never, ever, ever. But for me, it was a great way to introduce them to a whole foods plant-based diet, which, by the way, they're all vegan now.
Good job.
Yeah. I didn't.
Wow.
But I didn't try and convince them.
Can you come into my family?
I didn't try and convince them.
That's the key. But that's the key.
There might be a scallop here and there. I'm not going to say that but they consider themselves to be whole foods plant-based. And it was
amazing.
just, Beej and I going home and making pizza, and they were like, what, like, and not having cheese on it and having it taste amazing and using hummus for sauce, like all these different things that you can do. So, for me, the way it's morphed is that as a way that, yes, I can actually, create this beautiful nutrient-dense food for the people that I love so much. And then I take kind of my yogi skills as I'm doing it, and I'm creating it with love. And when I'm cutting the pepper, like it's a sharp knife and it's a clean cut. And I hold all of that with reverence because I understand that pepper was life. I love the way that Will Tuttle puts it, is that what we put in us becomes us.
Yeah, I always say that too. We are literally what we eat.
We are literally what we eat. Yes.
Our cells regenerate from our food. I mean, if you think about that, it's so crazy.
It's such a honest question too. Like, how do you feel? Like,
yeah.
How do you feel? And if you feel great after eating that food, awesome, amazing.
Yeah.
But if you don't, then wouldn't you want to change that? Wouldn't you want to seek something that would make you feel good?
Yeah, at least most of the time.
At least most of the time, yeah.
Yeah, and we don't even teach perfection. I don't even think there is a such thing as perfection. Like, we really teach, it's the preponderance of your life. Like, yeah, how do you feel? How are your labs? But like what I learned, I love this terminology that Ray uses, rare and appropriate. So like having a rare and appropriate is not every 2 weeks I have a cheat meal. It's, every time, he always says, every time I'm with my son, I have sushi. Or not every time, but we like to have sushi together. So once in a while, we'll have sushi together. Or like, for me, I don't know what would be my rare and appropriate. But like, like when I'm with Ray and we're in Thailand, we go nuts. Or like, we have wonderful Thai cuisine, but we'll overeat. And we feel crappy and we have all the salt and we can't wait to come home and, desalinate. But I mean, that whole concept of how do you feel is really important on the overall. And interestingly, the better you feel and the more you take care of yourself, that one rare and appropriate, you'll notice even more of a difference, which is really interesting too. But not perfection, but yeah.
Yeah, there's no perfection.
Well, who we truly are is perfection. But this goes to the classic case of we're looking outside of ourselves for our happiness and for our fulfillment, when in fact, like it's inside. Yeah, like nobody loves a vegan cinnamon bun like this girl. Right? But
that sounds good.
Oh my
Really
God. If you're ever in San Diego, let me know. There's a whole bakery that just opened up, and it's all, vegan almond croissants that are like
Vegan chocolate
unreal.
croissants.
Oh,
Yeah.
the chocolate croissants are amazing.
Pop-Tarts,
And
vegan
Pop-Tarts,
Pop-Tarts.
where they're taking like fresh berries from the farm, and they must be kind of reducing them and then like wrapping in them in some kind of vegan phyllo dough, and then they frost them with this lavender frosting and then actual lavender flowers on top.
Oh my goodness.
Like it's like the bougie
I'm
Pop-Tart.
kind of in it.
It's amazing. All right. Let's continue to go with like this relationship with food. And what's your experience? Have you had experience with working with people who they're labeling themselves as, I'm binge eating? We've definitely come up against that. And people ask us questions all the time. So I just would love to get your take and your experience on it.
In general,
Yeah.
it's become, it's so loaded. It's so loaded to ask about like any of those issues. Like for years, I was like, I don't deal with food, with eating disorders. Like I would refer it out. But now it's like become more intertwined with just eating. People are saying that more and more. And I'm seeing it almost regularly with people that are coming to me, all kinds of people, athletes, sick people, healthy people just wanting to go plant-based. And I don't really know how I feel about it, like how I would interpret what's happening because it's still fluctuating. All I could say is I've adopted a lot of Ray's great words. I call him Rayisms because he's changed so much of what I think. I mean, after studying nutrition my entire life, he taught me more than I've ever known. I mean, and he just taught himself all of this. So one of his Rayisms that I love is, because it's so true, is you're not broken. And it's not that you're binging because you're out of control, or I'm not a psychologist. That's the other thing. It's like he's really good at coaching that part because he understands the psyche better than I do. I come at more from a nutrition perspective, and I would say the foods that you eat contribute to that for sure. I've seen that, the whole hyperpalatable thing, people eating highly sugary, fatty, salty, processed foods. It's way easier to overeat that stuff. Like I don't see people overeating apples. I just don't. Our clients, we have 24 recipes that we drip out to them over their journey, and they learn how much they can eat. And then it's, you eat until you feel good, but those foods like chips, or popcorn, you can get to the bottom of it way too easily. So the foods you're eating, that's where my perspective is, because I'm not from the psychology perspective. That contributes a lot. But then there's like I said, there's so much emotion and social and everything, environmental stuff tied into eating that of course this is an issue for a lot of people, especially nowadays. The number one thing we've got going is we've got food like never before. The gas station, the airplane, you have a half an hour flight, they're still trying to feed you peanuts or whatever. It's like food is everywhere. You can't not be surrounded by food. And like, it tastes good. We're adapted to eat. Like, it's wow, we could have food and store it for later. But like in his metabolic winter hypothesis, winter never comes. We always have that accessibility to food. So we've never had this opportunity ever in history where we can have unlimited food. Pretty much anyone could have unlimited food, almost everyone. I know there's pockets in the world, but there are few now. Unlimited food, really hyperpalatable kinds of food, 24 hours a day. Of course we want to eat it. That's not abnormal. That's not psychologically pathological. That is normal. We don't say designed, but we are adapted to hold on, to want to eat because it's survival. What are we here for? Surviving and reproduction. So it's like that's a natural instinct. So the fact that it's available to us and it's so good and we've made it hyperpalatable, how could you stop? So it takes a lot of work and a lot of, I always, one of my best friends, she's like naturally one of those like, so thin, doesn't want to eat. Oh, I eat because I have to. But I've realized that there's not a lot of people like that. Most people enjoy food. It's really pleasurable. Like for me, it's hedonistic. Like, Reagan makes fun of me. Like I love to eat. Like I look forward to my meals and I hold it in reverence too. Like I love food. I love cooking. I love the whole experience. But she's one of those people that are like, I could take it or leave it, And I think that's really rare, So those are really rare because I've studied that my whole life. I've always looked for that because I've been fascinated by it. And that's why you see underweight as a very rare thing, it's like, and that's why it's so easy for us to have become, where the United States is 70% of us are overweight or obese, and it's 1 out of 3 in the world are overweight or obese, and 3 out of 4 almost here in the United States. It's never been like that.
Where do you think, and I don't know what your experience is with this, but mindfulness and like applying mindfulness to eating. Like,
I teach it too for food, for
good.
sure. I mean, I love it. I try to teach exercises when I'm giving lectures, but it doesn't always work. But I'm a big proponent of it, because why do we get to the bottom of the bucket of the popcorn in a movie? Because we're not even paying attention to it. It's just mindless eating, and mindless eating is really harmful. It's not, first of all, what's the point? You're not enjoying it, and second of all, you're easily adding up not healthy calories, whatever. You're eating too much without even enjoying it. So I like to teach people that you should really like set the setting, and I try to do this myself every time I eat. Like, make sure the environment's quiet and peaceful and comfortable, and you're not like reading, or you're not on your phone. And I love I love Japanese food and sushi, because the whole idea is, the visual comes first, and that's why their food is so beautiful, and a lot of places around the world, but that was like the first place I learned about it when I was a teenager, is about like making it's visual, and it's what you smell, and there's a whole experience. It's very exciting, and I try to tell my clients to like have that bite and really taste it. Like, it tastes, try to chew it a lot, like more than you ever would, instead of just gulping it down. Yeah, I mean, it's a whole different experience, and I learned about that when also when I was a teenager exploring this stuff. And I'll never forget the first muffin I had when I decided to do that. The whole experience, like, I remember that muffin still, and this is 30 years ago, 20 something years ago, where I was like, I remember every bite and every smell and every crumb of that muffin, this blueberry muffin I had, and it was such an extraordinary experience, and I try to replicate that. And I tell my clients, like, at least, it doesn't have to be perfect with every bite and everything, because it's not always going to be like that. We have a hustle bustle life, most of us. So at least try to make that, at least try to taste your food and put your fork down, and, and absorb your environment and take in as much as you can, as often as you can.
As athletes, sometimes when we're in the height of our training, like,
oh yeah,
almost every meal is like in the car. You're like eating oatmeal in the car. So how could somebody be more mindful when they're eating on the go?
It's hard to. I don't suggest doing that all the time. I mean, and again, not perfect. So when you can.
And you don't have to be.
And you don't have
because
to be.
You already are.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say just when you can, make it as mindful as you can.
And how could they do that? How could they make it mindful?
Pull over.
Yeah.
Well, that would be ideal.
Probably the safest
That would
way.
be ideal.
Or even, you don't want to be sitting there, I used to do that when I was a trainer, working from, leaving my house at 5 a.m. and home at 10 p.m. after school at night. And I remember eating in the car all the time. So I would try to at least like taste my food and like kind of enjoy my food, and at least not be on the phone or listening to the radio at the same time. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't recommend driving and eating. And I mean, hopefully that's not something that has to happen all the time or on a daily basis. And then at least make your one meal a day, or I don't know. It's just, I always say, just do what you can, do your best. I don't think that's got to be a daily, everyday.
But like chewing your food, that's way too simple, like that's way too simple. And this whole idea of like, stop worrying about protein and where you're getting your iron, like stop breaking it all down, just eat the symphony of what Mother Nature has provided. Like, that's too simple. And do you find that that's where people are mostly getting stuck? Like, in your experience, where do you feel people are getting stuck? Where you fear, like, they're not going to get enough and they're going to die. Like your parents, right? And they set you up with that nurse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm still here. 14 years later, I've been vegan. I'm fine. I'm actually doing better than I was. And actually, they went vegan for a while, the nurse, because her husband had a heart attack. It's kind of sad, and it's kind of this...
Oh my God, the nurse went vegan?
They went vegan after all that, many, many years later. I don't think they're vegan anymore, because then they read a book. But anyway... there's a lot of places you get stuck. I think the macro confusion is a big one. We have our clients, and pretty much all my clients, I recommend take a multi now. I've gotten to that point. I used to say, oh, you don't need anything. Maybe you just need B12. But now I'm like, there's a few nutrients that just to cover your bases and then it also alleviates that concern about some of the micronutrients that are harder to get, like iodine, for instance. Soil's not the same. Not everyone lives by the coast. So the few nutrients that are just notable, I call them notable nutrients. So the concern about getting enough is where people get concerned. I would say the biggest place people get concerned across the board, no matter what you're trying to eat, is social. It's all psychosocial. if I go out, I'm like, I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat lunch, and my mom gets mad at me. Like this happened yesterday. She gets mad at me that I won't eat. But forget my mom. My issues. But people get upset, okay? And they're like, you don't need to lose weight. You're perfect. You shouldn't lose weight. You shouldn't be eating that. Or you need to eat more protein. You're not. Everyone eats, so everyone has an opinion about food. And it gets in your mind. No matter how solid you are on this information. Our clients, we're sitting there talking to them, we're giving them all the science behind every detail. They go out with their friend says, well, I read a book or I read a blog post that you're gonna get, lectin poisoning from eating beans. And they're like, then it gets in their head. It's still gonna be in your head, well, what if that's true? Well, maybe it's not true. Especially if you don't have the experience of reading the literature, then it's even scarier. You're like, well, what if I can? And it just starts to eat away, and then people just, that's another sticking point, I think, is so much misinformation in the media. And I think everyone absorbs it and everyone talks like an expert on nutrition, and it's confusing. And
it's almost the time to take responsibility for your body. Take responsibility for yourself. Like you hear and maybe this is my perspective, but you hear the thing about beans. Well, for me, beans are fine. Like I've eaten beans and I eat a lot of beans and it's fine for me. Right? So just experience it. And I'm sure Ray does this. Ray does it a lot of experiments on himself, doesn't he, at first?
Mm-hmm. And we were just talking about all the stuff we want to do. We're going to do all crazy stuff. Yeah. It's fun.
So use that. Like tap into yourself. Like what is it to you? Like prove those other people wrong to a point. Like what does it feel for you? Like have the beans.
Well, okay, I love that. I love that.
Ahead.
But then a lot of people that haven't eaten fiber and haven't eaten beans will have a serious reaction to it, and it takes time to get used to. So that's not always the case. And what I've also learned now I've worked with hundreds of people, hundreds at this point, directly, one-on-one, and thousands of people through audiences and through all that stuff and readers and stuff like that. And people are the same. We're not so different. That whole concept that I was taught in grad school, everyone's different. Very little difference between people. Most people respond almost identically to foods. Yes, there are food allergies and food intolerances, but we are so much more alike than we are different. So that said, it's important, and most people, if they're eating a plant-based diet and they're including their beans, they're gonna feel great because ultimately, but when you're adjusting your microbiome because you haven't done that before, that would be like the one kind of differentiation. And I don't want people to think, oh, I'm broken, I can't eat this way, I need to have more protein, because it's just, there's a scientific method for a reason. There's we can distill all of that, and the evidence is very, very, I think, very clear. That there are a lot of things you can generalize.
So what are some things that people, because, and I totally agree with you, like in our essence, we are so the same, like what we're trying to navigate here on this earth. Like, and so it might play out a little bit different, like your mom is not my mom, but there are things about relationships between daughters and moms that are very exact.
P.S.
Right?
I love you, Mom. Like I've said this to her in lectures, and I always give her a hard time, but we all have our little, anyway, I had to say that in case for some reason she hears this.
No, it's important. And we just sent it to her anyway. We just sent it to her energetically.
Yes.
We love you, Mom.
She knows.
What are some things that people may come across or experience that might not feel good as they are adjusting their microbiome?
First and foremost, there's a big shift in your GI tract. Big time. But what's so interesting about the microbiome and there's different bacteria profiles that you have, the types that you have, and the amount you have, and the species you have, and all that, it changes on a circadian clock. So like minute to minute, this is changing, which you would never think, right? Where you travel to, where you're from, your exposure to everything you eat changes the composition of your microbiome. And we're finding more and more information. We're at the tip of the iceberg with what we know about it, but it's fascinating. And it's like directly linked to our immune system and our, everything. So fiber is what feeds the microbiome, the good microbiome. Like you want to have, there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria. This we could say good and bad. I don't like to say good food, bad food, but I will say there are bacteria that promote disease and there are bacteria that promote health. So when you eat prebiotics, so fiber, different types of fibers and stuff, you feed the good bacteria and those will proliferate and kill out the bad bacteria. But this takes time and shifts, and it depends on what you eat. And if you have a night where you're having delicious vegan Pop-Tarts and maybe a glass of wine, it's going to shift. So it's an adjustment period. And most people experience this in a gastrointestinal type of way. Like you will have, especially when you're just going from like a very low fiber, which most people are on a low fiber diet, unfortunately, like I think it's like 10% of the population are getting the minimum recommended fiber. Crazy. So just adjusting it a little bit, you're going to have gas and bloating and maybe constipation or diarrhea. Like you're going to have GI symptoms, and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. So it depends on the extent of it, and it depends on, some people have stronger guts than others in terms of what they can withstand or what they're used to or what they had in their history. So there are some differentiations between people, but that's the primary thing I think people will notice in terms of like physically, what they feel physically.
Is there anything that can help that, like more hydration? Like is there anything that can help that as they're getting to the other side of it? So there's this concept in, I believe it's Chinese medicine. It's called Mencken, where you get a little bit worse before you get better. Like you feel a little bit worse before you kind of get over the hump into whatever this new phase of health that you're going to move through. So is there anything that like helps with bloating or you just got to ride it out?
Usually you have to kind of write it out. I think there's like I hate the word detox too, but there is a period of time where your body's like getting rid of, a lot of that stuff that you were kind of, and like that whole, like, I'm ready for my junk food again, like that whole thing where your body will really kind of like expect it. And when it's not getting, it's almost like I guess it's kind of like a detox really, but anyway. So that said, I would say, if you dive all the way in, which sometimes is better, sometimes it's better to do a stepwise progression in terms of it easing in. I think sometimes people do better easing in, but when you dive in, it's easier to like, you just deal with it and then you move on with your life. But so it just depends on you, like what you prefer. But there are little things. Like I would say, when I had a client who's like, I can't have any beans at all. I'm like, okay, have a quarter cup of beans, an eighth of a cup of beans. And he came back to me, he's like, I had 2 beans and I responded and reacted. I've never heard that before, and I'm still not sure if I believe that. Yeah, I know.
Just 2 beans.
Yeah, I had 2 and it was terrible.
I'm like, okay, that would be really awful. But most people, I say, start with a quarter cup a day or an eighth a cup a day if it's really bad, you never had it. And then work up. So have that for a week and then work up to a half a cup and then work up to a cup and then work up eventually to, I want you to have 1.5 cups of legumes every day. That helps to go taper up. When you're cooking your own beans and you put in a stick of kombu, some seaweed in there, that helps absorb some of the oligosaccharides. Rinsing your beans helps. There are little things that help, but really you're just going to have to go through it a little bit. Hydration helps.
You're going to have to pay the price for eating like shit.
Hey, you said it, I didn't, but yes. And the other thing is, what I've noticed, what I've started implementing with myself and with a lot of clients is, and it's not always ideal for athletes, but it works for a lot of athletes, is time restricted feeding. Gives your gut time to recover. So I think that's helped a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of people with GI issues. I mean, myself included, and that really seems to help.
What does that look like?
Fasting or no,
so it's
separate?
It's been tied to, it's like there's so much, like fasting doesn't.
I know there's so many people's perspective on it.
Yeah, Ray and I were literally just talking about this before you guys got here because we're talking about our new research and stuff and how it's just gotten so muddled. And really the most accurate way to say it is time restricted feeding. So it basically means you're restricting your window and you're in the fed state and expanding your window in the fasted state, basically. Yep. But it's not really fasting if you're going just in between meals. Like people are calling it that. Or they're saying, I fast every other day and I have 500 calories on those days. I'm like, well, that's not fasting, So we don't really use that word. So time restricted fasting. So basically giving yourself many, many hours, as many as you can tolerate, to an extent, in the fasted state. And then your body is not having to deal with all of that stuff. Like it's a lot of work and a lot of energy to have to digest and absorb. And it takes away from all the metabolic house cleaning that needs to occur elsewhere. So people that are having GI stuff, it seems to be like the less you're putting through there or the less frequently you're putting through there, it gives yourself time to heal and to do other things.
It makes sense that you eat and then you give the body time to process that and assimilate, and then you eat and then you give time to assimilate. So this whole idea, like that craze where it was like eat 8 million meals throughout the day, like you're just constantly grazing, right?
Keeping your metabolism fueled, like right. Burning. It's like really, but I mean, you're constant. Remember that from the last bite, it's still 4 to 6 hours to process that meal. But we never give ourselves 4 to 6 hours because it's time for the snack and it's time for lunch and it's time for the next snack and it's time for dinner and then it's time for bed. Not good for our bodies to be constantly in the fed state.
Yeah, and I would think that would be good for our control freaks out there, right? Like, and I can say that because I used to be one, where you can like really start being like, okay, I'm going to, like the people who like the schedule, right? Like I'm going to do this and then I'm not going to eat for that 4 to 6 hours. I'm going to let my body, and then so it's kind of making you feel pretty productive, right? So it's individual to how the person works, but it makes so much sense. And I remember when that whole grazing thing was coming around, and I didn't really know anything other than I love food and and I've always had a pretty like I just like to
more
eat
food,
and
more
right.
But I remember thinking like, I mean, I was a massage therapist, so I knew a little bit about the body, and I was like, that just doesn't make any sense. It feels like your body, you're always, because it's that healing, the parasympathetic nervous system is the function of digestion, correct? So that healing nervous system, that calming nervous system, and that if we're constantly putting in, then how are we processing? It doesn't make any sense. It never made any sense to me to eat all the
Our
time.
body's amazing at what it'll withstand. I mean, we could withstand a lot, but we're talking about optimal functioning. You want to give it a break.
Yeah.
Like let it do other things. Like we need to get rid of all the virus cells and all the cancer cells and all the stuff that we're attacked with all day long. And like then the cells that we need to do apoptosis and all that stuff needs to happen. And when we're focusing on digestion and absorption, the body shunts to it. Like if you're like, that's why if you eat, you're not supposed to get right in the pool, as you probably know well. Why do you get cramps? Because your body's like, oh shoot, I need blood to my muscles. But really your blood wants to be there at the digestive tract, focusing on digestion. It's a very intensive process to put, what are you gonna do with all this stuff? What are you gonna use for energy? What are you gonna, excrete? What are you gonna, it's a whole brilliant process.
It really is. It's magnificent. And, I think if we get out of the way a little bit and and let it do its thing,
yes,
and
that's exactly right.
Stop trying to micromanage everything. I think we'd all be a lot healthier.
I was going to say, we've played around with that. What do you call it?
Time restricted feeding.
Time restricted feeding. Mostly, I do it on Saturdays every other, maybe once or twice a month. And the experience I have, I'll stop eating at 8 at night and won't have anything until 11 or 12 the next day. So about 16 hours. Mm-hmm. And in that span, I'll teach 2 yoga classes. I'll do a treadmill workout just on water. And my awareness and my acute awareness basically is like up at another level. Like everything is very clear to me. And I don't do it often because I'm an endurance athlete. So I train 20, 25 hours a week. So I don't want anybody to go out there and be like, I'm going to start doing this. But I feel like it resets the body. And then my session, the first meal that gets in is a high, smoothie bowl, like something super vibrant, like fruits and vegetables. And then that following day, I'll have another quality session. And I feel like the body just needed a little reset.
Totally.
And I do, in my realm, I do use those performance stuff, the gels and the stuff every once in a while, in the intensity of in the mimicking of race day, but I feel like that body needs a reset. And when you have that diet, that daily diet that's totally quality, your body, I feel, can respond better to those fuels. So it's not like relying on those fuels. It's got a solid foundation, like a house. Like it's got
you're not going to get into some kind of nutritional problem because you're shooting down gels during Ironman because his gut is solid coming into it.
And it's been
daily
7-8 years now since we've been plant-based and since we've been doing this. Like there's no issues that I have on my race days because, and I'm not going to say it's just because of the timing and the food, but it's a lot of things. It's the low stress. It's the being mindful. It's you put that whole stew together and you show up on race day and there you go. Yep. There's your formula.
Yeah, just like food is a symphony, I think a healthy lifestyle is very much a part of that. It's not just, I've heard like you can't out exercise like a crappy diet.
No.
Like
so you can do all that work.
You can even eat like broccoli all day long, but if your life is in a shambles and you're not able to navigate stress and you're miserable or your relationship to what's happening in life, like that's going to affect what's happening. That's going to affect your ability to digest, that rest and digest nervous system, right? So what's next? Can you talk about your book?
Yes, I would love to.
All right,
Oh my God,
let's have it.
I'm so excited. I just love working with Ray. I'm like so excited because it's just funny because I'm a dietitian, right? I have 7 years of hardcore science training. Right? I can analyze a diet. I could do all sorts of crazy science stuff, which I love. But yet everyone asked me to make recipes. Like from the first book, they're like, and there'll be 50 recipes. I'm like, what do you mean? I don't cook. My mom didn't teach me how to cook. Like I taught myself how to shove stuff together in the kitchen because I wanted to eat healthy and I love food. I'm not a trained chef. So that's the funny part. So background story. So this is my 5th book now. And now I get to work with the scientist guy who happens to be a trained chef.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I know he went to culinary school. So we're such a good team because I love to eat and he loves to cook and we love to make recipes together. So we are doing a cookbook. So 100 recipes, which I would never have wanted to do on my own because I've already done, I just don't love doing recipe development, not my forte. But I had so much fun with him because we were in the kitchen doing science and cooking and saying, look at, we don't need oil, but we could play with this. And we have so it's like the most deep dive into the science. It's everything you wanted to know about what to eat, why to eat, how to eat, when to eat, everything in the first 3 chapters. We'll see how much the editor lets us get through because it's so much information. I'm so excited about it. But we talk about crazy stuff like MSG. We don't have any in our recipes, but we talk about the controversy of it. That's a whole other story. I can go on for an hour about our MSG story. It's very funny. We talk about salt and using salt carefully. And so we were scientifically experimenting with all of this in the kitchen. And then we came up with 100 really fun recipes. And it's very disruptive. So we did, instead of breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and desserts, because we don't do that because we don't talk about meals, we did soup, salad, sides, and sweets. Those are our 4 recipe chapters. So I'm so excited about this book. And we got photos. It's my first book with photos. And
I love the sides.
Gorgeous.
That's one thing I tell people when they're like, how am I going to go to the... we had a gentleman that we were working with who works in the automotive industry. And so he's going to these conventions and he's going out with all these automotive guys and whatever. And here he is transitioning to a plant-based diet. And I was like, dude, sides menu.
Yeah.
Go all sides menu. So I love that you've got that in there. Because
we tell everyone just to eat sides.
It's the best.
Of course. Absolutely. I mean, you can get some of the best meals at a steakhouse and it's all the delicious sides. Mm-hmm. So that's what we say. Eat your side. Just eat sides. And so, so that's one of our chapters. But I'm really excited about this because it's how to, why, and then beautiful, delicious. I mean, really, I'm so excited.
It doesn't sound like we've seen a cookbook like this before.
We haven't. We looked at cookbooks. We found one that was very similar in the 19th century or the 18th century. And it was
your direct competition.
Except it's not, I don't know if you can get it anymore, so not that big of a competition. But it was like science at the beginning and then recipes. And it was or receipts. They called them receipts. And I'm like, I've never seen anything like it now because... So I don't know. I'm really excited about this because we put everything we wanted to talk about Healthspan into this. And it's really everything we believe in and what we teach and what we live by. And it can taste, we want food to taste delicious. So he makes it taste even extra delicious. I'm on sodium patrol and oil patrol. We kind of had some battles about some things, which was really fun because we wanted it to be right. We never say it's about who's right, it's what's right. We really have answers for everything. And his amazing Kickstarter project, Our Broken Plate, it's a tome of this whole thing documented, everything that happened in nutrition, metabolism, and everything. And he was already almost done with it when he met me, and then he just never finished publishing it. So that's what we're working on next to finish it because, he wrote it. It's insane. But his last chapter was the Healthspan Solution, and that's what this is called. So it was basically, this book is coming out now.
It's
supposed to be the sequel. And so we've got, exactly. So it's going to be, so
You're
we're going to get that out too.
You're just doing it like Star Wars.
Exactly. That's what I told in the prequel. Exactly. But we're hoping to get Our Broken Plate done before that and have him get it out before. But either way, it's all that information. It was this will be the expanded version and this will be how to do it with the recipes and why and all that.
That's so cool. When are we going to see it?
So the Healthspan Solution publishes in December. And hopefully Our Broken Plate will get before or close thereafter, but we're going to work on that starting now. And then we're working on a research paper on diabetes, which is also crazy disruptive.
Oh, I love it.
And just working on our company on Ephoros, on getting, we have a lifestyle transformation company. We work with clients, major lifestyle transformation. We have very predictable results, and it's been extraordinary to do that together. And so we're trying to scale that up because we want to be able to take on more people, because we have to say no to so many people, because there's only 2 of us right now. So we need our app. We're getting our app developed and all that. So that's what we're busy with.
My God,
wow.
And then
so
more retreats too. We're going to try to go back to Thailand in January, and we did a couple retreats there in January. It was incredible.
So the retreats obviously centered around food. What else is
it's
included in those?
Yeah, so it's a 5-star resort that happens to have a plant-based kitchen, a culinary school. So we do cooking. We teach nutrition, Healthspan, and then they teach culinary. We make food and eat, and go get a massage at night down the street for $10 an hour. The best massages of your life, because it's Thailand. So yeah.
All right. Well, let me know if you ever need a yoga teacher on those retreats.
Yeah, seriously, you should come with us.
All right. One final question. Like, people who are out there, we just had an athlete of ours text us this morning that she suggested that her parents watch Forks Over Knives, and they finished the movie and her dad said, "Well, I'm in." So but they're like, we don't know how to start.
So yeah, what's the
I know
1,
you've
2,
had
3
this-
of how to start? And it seems like they want that step-by-step process. But is that the best, or I shouldn't say the best? What would you consider the easiest transition to move from this point to a plant-based diet?
Yeah,
Once you're aware.
Okay, so that's what Plant-Based Nutrition Idiot's Guide is like how, why, here's what to do.
Okay,
Because
first thing, buy that book.
Yeah, I hate saying that because that was the book that I wish when I wanted to go plant-based when I was a teenager. I wish that was the book I had, because
Awesome.
It answers all those questions. Where do I get this nutrient? Where do I get that? How do I eat this? Plus the recipes. What does a day in the life look like? All of those questions. I also have I try to summarize it on my website. I did a blog post a couple years ago called, and I'm trying not to use the word vegan anymore, but because I want people to know you don't have to be perfect to eat this way.
Yeah,
Plant-based diet.
inclusive.
Yeah, and also now that veganism has so many processed foods out there, and you get everything I could eat. You could eat vegan, with the ice cream and candies and all that stuff. So I don't like to use the word vegan anymore as much. But anyway, it was 500 words. Everything you need to know about going vegan in 500 words or less. So it's all like a summary. Because what you need to do is really make it simple, not worry about macro confusion. Eat vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in infinite tasty combinations. Here's my best advice. We don't eat that many different meals. We rotate, through maybe 1 or 2 different breakfasts. We don't like to do that, but maybe let's say 4 or 5 different meals a week. Really, 6, 7, 8 if you're really kind of exploratory and adventurous, or if you're eating a lot because you're exercising a lot. Just find those few meals that you love and make them delicious plant-based meals. And now, not only you don't have to go get a cookbook. There's thousands and thousands of recipes online. Find something that sounds delicious. Try it. When you find one you like I started with a pile of recipes, and when I had one that I loved, I put a heart on it. When I found one I didn't, I would try to modify, and if it didn't work, I didn't like it, I threw it away. And then I ended up with a list, and I would just rotate through the recipes I love. Nutrition is not an emergency. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to eat a certain amount of every variety every single day. It doesn't have to be perfect. And if you let go of that and stop, and don't talk to anyone about this, because everyone will talk you out of it, about eating a plant-based diet, just stay in your little bubble. You find a few meals you like, that's all you need. Eat healthy, eat plants.
Live longer. And live
Live better. We say in our intro to Healthspan Solution, eating carrots is not going to make you immortal. It's not. We can't solve aging completely, but this is the best diet we know of.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that was so great, Julieanna.
Thank you.